G'day everyone, Adrian here from the Endgame. I'm going to go for a fly today out of the Sunshine Coast, our office here at the Sunshine Coast, and privileged to be flying today with Sharon Mcclafferty, CEO of Slipstream Group. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you so much, Adrian. I'm looking forward to a fantastic start to a Friday.
Fantastic. It is a Friday, isn't it? I hadn't thought about that. And it's a beautiful day for a Friday. We're looking out over the Sunshine Coast, and we're going to go flying up to the north and see what the weather looks like up there. But I think it'll be a beautiful day, so I'm looking forward to it. Let's get in the air and we can have a bit of a chat then.
Brilliant.
Sounds good.
Pass your uniform. Climb to 10,000. Cleared for takeoff. Make right turn.
Climb to 10,000, clear for takeoff, make right turn. Papa Sierra uniform. All good?
All good.
Alright, full power. Engine T's and P's are in the green. Airspeed is live. Rotate. Alright. How are you feeling up in the air, Sharon? Beautiful day?
I'm feeling fantastic, Adrian. I was at more risk, I think, on the highway this morning, so...
I think you're probably right. I do often say that to people. People say to me, don't you feel unsafe up in the air? And I say, don't you feel unsafe doing 200 kilometres an hour closing speed with a truck?
Yeah, worst comes to worst, my estate planning is up to date.
It is. Oh, very good. Well, in your line of business, I guess you would have to be diligent on that sort of stuff. You couldn't be having the customers you have and then suggest you don't have good, solid estate and financial planning.
You would be really surprised at the leaders in that game often have not sorted out their own situation. That plumber with the leaky tap is so true when it comes to estate planning for accountants and financial planners. We've seen some pretty appalling situations, to be honest.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, that plumber with the leaking tap scenario? You see that in all areas of business.
Yeah.
It's quite common. So tell us about Slipstream. Tell us about how you got involved in Slipstream and what the journey has been.
Yeah, so Slipstream Group started almost 8 years ago. Myself and two business partners or colleagues from a previous world kind of reconnected. I never had an intention of being a business founder or a business owner, to be honest. I never had that intention at all. It probably came about, I previously worked for a business coach serving the accounting profession, and he had a pivot to a technology business and actually cancelled the coaching element of his business, and so I was trying to help some firms find a capable and competent coach. It's probably my backstory, and so I was calling around the country, talking to every single coaching business and option so that I could refer clients to somewhere that I felt comfortable stamping my name on there. And I came up with not a lot, Adrian. Like, business coaching is the Wild West. It's completely unregulated and it's full of morons. So, and it's actually full of people who've never owned, operated and successfully exited a business. So, yeah, I just found that wild, to be honest, and I definitely couldn't put my name and recommend anyone that was currently out there. So Slipstream Coaching, which has now become Slipstream Group, was formed.
Fantastic story. So an accidental founder, really.
Yeah, and almost reluctant. I had a less than 1 year old baby. I had no intention of. I had told myself I was going to take a year off and just relax. I definitely had no intention of founding a business, but I'm really glad that I did, and I'm really proud of what we've achieved in 8 years.
That's fantastic. I think the story is not dissimilar to many founders, really. I think many founders don't necessarily set out with a plan to get into business, do they? They don't necessarily sort of do that. They have some passion, some technical skill, something they want to change, like you've highlighted, and that's what gets them into business. But I don't think I've used that term before, accidental founder, or thought about it, but in a lot of cases it is, right?
Yeah, and I've actually, prior to starting the business, always thought of myself as a really quality second in a business. Like, I can make a whole bunch of things happen in a short period of time across a diversity of kind of capabilities, but I never saw myself as the visionary or the person who was responsible for the ideas or the strategy. I've always been previously responsible for executing someone else's strategy. So it's been good for me as well to be out of that comfort zone.
Yeah, it's that execution of strategy and development of strategy is, we play a lot in that space, and I guess we probably play more in that execution space than we do in the strategic space. But it is often different, I guess, moving across those two areas of business, isn't it? And learning in strategy having come from execution.
Yeah, when you're not the owner, there is also, there's certainly accountability in terms of I believe in having a strong personal brand. So, I've always been accountable to doing the right thing and being proud of my actions. But if I haven't set the strategy, then I'm not accountable for it being the right one. I'm accountable for the execution being done to a standard that I'm happy to stamp my name on. So it's a very different play when, well, guess what? If it doesn't work, you not only came up with the ideas, but you also executed them. So
yeah, I like that. We talk about it a fair bit in the work we do with business, not just business founders, but also with senior sort of leadership team members. That if you can actually get your team to be a big part of setting the strategy and be a big part of owning that strategy, then execution becomes so much easier. Execution happens so much better when people own it. It's almost like you put your hand up and said, I'm gonna make this happen now. It's your personal brand, like you said, to actually do it, to go through with what you said.
yeah, and that comes down to hiring and having quality people around you who are authentic and honest and open for conflict and challenge and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So what do you love most about your role in Slipstream or about the Slipstream team?
Well, we've got an interesting team, I think, which is half of our team are independently wealthy people who never need to work again. So that, in terms of, the HR component of running a business, half of my team could equally not turn up to any job ever again in their life. So a big part of the reason we turn up to work is because we think the work is important and we love the idea of having a positive impact on people's life, not in the short term, but in the long term. So I think it's a pretty unique model, but it also means that retention of team means you have to not only provide a quality business that runs really well, but they have to actually enjoy it. So we do things like we have 2 coaching retreats a year, where it's a very collegiate environment where everyone's kind of, even though they professionally, they don't have to grow, they could never have a career again, but they want to grow and they want to be challenged and they want to get better. So I like that that's a bit different in our business.
Yeah, that's very different, and I really like that concept that you're talking about people that otherwise don't have to work. It sort of takes away the fact that people often see that as the only reason to go to work, or they think that the only reason they go to work is for the salary, is for the money. But in many cases it isn't. And I guess you're demonstrating that pretty well in your business.
Yeah, so we sort of say in any business, regardless of their personal situation, treat people like volunteers because they could equally cross the road and work for someone else. So treat them like we treat our team like volunteers, although we pay them very well, because they could do something else, or they're really talented and clever people. We've got a team with very strong EQ. So yes, if you don't treat people like adults, and then they can go elsewhere.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, isn't it? Treat people like volunteers is not something I've heard before, but I really like that. That's great. And sort of hones that thinking that we're not here just for a paycheck. We're here for a purpose. We're here for a passion. We're here for an end game, to use the name that we sort of talk about in our business. And it's not just about the paycheck that people are getting. If you can create an environment where people love what they do, want to come to work, and their passion lines up with the passion of the organisation. That's how you get success.
Yeah, and acknowledge kind of that whole person concept. So I, for the last month, I'm quite convinced that our entire team is either in Europe or unwell. So we've got half a dozen people in Europe right now for a month, not together, just on their own random trips. But yeah, like this is it. This is life. So I maybe have moved past the idea that work is everyone's number one goal at the moment. Like, it's not. Having this full, exciting life where you don't have any regrets is probably a big part of it.
I think you're an unusual founder and CEO in acknowledging that and wanting to actually make that part of what you want to drive in your team. That's it's not every day that founders have that perspective for their teams. Yeah, and we have that perspective for our clients as well. So we market ourselves as business coaches, but when you're dealing with privately held businesses and you're dealing with the owners of those businesses, there is no horizon between business and life. You improve your business, you improve your life. We also encourage our clients to live maybe happier and more ambitious lives, not just more ambitious businesses. And sometimes that's at the expense of their business. That's okay. Yeah, I guess that's very different. That's very different to many business owners and many business sort of founders and leaders that I've spoken to. And fantastic, really. It comes down to that passion for the person, passion for what they want to do in life, and acknowledging that work is part of that, but not all of it. It also comes back to sustainability. Like with our clients, they could go really, really hard and really smash the margin for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. That's great, but probably not for 15. Yeah. So if you, rather than working at 120% for 5 years, maybe work at 80% for 15 years and enjoy the journey. And then when you get to that end game, well, 15 years of building a business is going to be a very different outcome compared to 4 years at 120%. So it's that getting that sustainability balance right as well. Yeah, for sure. I love the use of the word end game in that discussion there, Sharon. By the way, that really pleases me. But absolutely, it's having that picture of where you want to go and what's important is so poorly done for so many business owners. So many that we deal with, and it's encouraging and different to talk to you and hear that's a passion and a way that you deal with sort of driving performance for your customers that's certainly outside of the box. I want to be really clear, Adrian, I think you might find this as well, about half of the people we work with cannot articulate what they want. Yep. So they can't, it's not like we're working exclusively with people who have this real clarity on their vision or where they want to be in 5 years. Probably at half or more than half the people we work with can clearly articulate their discontent with the present. So that's okay. That's a great place to start. Here's what's annoying me about the present. So we kind of often just get started on fixing those things. And once you get some momentum on reducing the negativity, then there's some space to think about, what do I want? I see just tons of people waste years and years because they haven't got the vision of what they want. And because they don't know what they want, they don't do anything. They just sit largely still. So yeah, we don't want to wait until someone can articulate this clear future to get started. It's okay to go, well listen, the business is too reliant on me and I want to hire average spend per client. Well, let's start there. Yeah, perfect. It's actually so similar to our approach that we talk about the end game, but when we talk about the end game, we don't talk about that in terms of specifics. It's not a 200-page strategy report written by a consulting firm. Like, it's not that. That's not what we're talking about. We have, one of my experiences that I talk about quite often was involved in a business in serious trouble, and the whole team was lacking direction, board included, and being able to actually, just on the back of a beer coaster, quite literally, being able to actually say, where are we now, and what would success look like at the moment over a time period, and not get into any more detail than that, but know some simple things about what the end game might look like, and also acknowledge that it can change. As one of the most difficult things I find dealing with founders is they don't want to commit to too much, because they think, well, I don't know if that's right now. I don't know if it's going to be right in 6 months, or if it's going to be right. Be prepared to change that. It can change, as much as you want to. But having an idea of where you're going, having an end game in mind, is so important to be able to make good decisions.
Yeah, and it's like, we're up here, it's like kind of knowing the heading, but not necessarily the destination. But we're, within 10% of our heading is kind of where we want to land, and we can adjust, but getting going is really important, and you learn and iterate along the way. And I try and counsel myself in terms of one of the biggest risks is no action. Like, that's not making a decision carries just as much risk as making a decision.
Yeah. You're speaking my language. Like, we talk about a bias for action and making decisions over and above anything else, because the reality is, and I love you're talking about the heading now, or we know we're going to be back at the Sunshine Coast today. We know that's the destination, but things could change along the way about the path we choose to go. We might decide to go a different way. There might be some weather ahead of us. There might be some aircraft ahead of us. Something might be there that we need to get around that might change. But we're going to get back to the Sunshine Coast. That's the end game. We're going to do that today. And in aviation, like in business, if we don't make those decisions as we go along, how are we going to get there? That's not going to end in a good way for us today. If we don't make decisions, we don't have that option here in the air, but yet many business owners feel that they have that option in business.
Yeah, I love the discipline of flying, particularly small planes. There is this element of discipline. There are minimum standards that are really, really high. And I think that business can probably learn a whole bunch from how the average small pilot, small aeroplane pilot works.
Yeah, for sure. And I in some talks I do to leaders in business, I make the link between various things in aviation, various bias from that you learn in aviation, things like confirmation bias. There are many of them that really you need to be aware of as a human operating in an aircraft, because those are natural. They're natural bias. You've got to be aware of them so that you can have a way of acknowledging that, of recognising that, and ensuring that you don't fall into traps. But the same thing applies in business. Knowing yourself and knowing your bias in a business situation is so important. And it's not something to sort of think that's a fault. It's not a fault. Every human has it. What's important is we acknowledge it, and then we look to find ways to avoid making mistakes from it.
One of the tools that we use in our own business and with lots of our clients is called Instinctive Drives, and it's an online tool, and you sort of fill in a 20-minute questionnaire, and it spits out sort of where you sit on these 4 drives, and it is based on instinct. And I use that in our business. So if anything ever went wrong in terms of communication between people, I can stand at this wall and work out how that happened. And knowing my own drivers absolutely makes me a better leader. It makes me more aware of my faults, and my, your faults can also be your secret weapon. So I am massively driven to verify, which is probably why I started a coaching business in where there are no regulations, and I've set these crazy high standards for my coaches because I'm always looking for more data and more comparisons, and I probably have an issue with trust. I don't want to know the answer, I want to know how you got to the answer. And knowing that about myself is just that insight I'm now consciously aware of when I need to turn that instinct off. And I consciously, that's not a subconscious thing, I consciously have to say to myself, this is not an occasion that you need to use that skill. And that's so important when you're leading really clever people, because if you ask someone, you're paying someone the healthy 6-figure salary and you ask them to find you the best payment platform, or when they come back and say, well, it's Ignition, you need to go, fantastic, let's get started, rather than how many did you review? What did you, what did you do to find the information? So our clients really benefit from understanding their own biases and their own instincts and their own MO. So in our team, we had an exclusively high verified team, and what that actually meant was we didn't ship many things because it had to be perfect, had to be right, and it could never be right enough. And then we've actually hired 2 team members who are not driven to verify and are driven, to trust and gut instinct, and I use the word ship, but they are the most productive people in our team. They're incredible because they know when they can just trust and just go with it, and they're happy with a greater margin of error than anyone else in our team. So we've learnt about the diversity that we require in our team as well.
Fantastic, and it's that I love the way your conversation goes. It's so similar, really, to when we're in different customers, different market segments in that way. But in a lot of ways, we deal with very similar issues and very similar things with our clients. So what's your would you say is your biggest success story as a CEO?
Adrian, I think I made 3 key decisions during COVID, and I think they all paid off. So one of them was just mindset going into it. So on the 13th of March, Friday the 13th of March 2020, when it all really kicked off, I had a beer with 2 of our coaches, and we have no minimum term, we have no contract, we have no notice to leave for our clients, and we're a month-by-month agreement. So I sat there having a beer the afternoon of Friday the 13th, and thought, wow, if people are looking at their P&L and want an easy way to cut some cost, then we're a really easy way to do that. And I thought, you know what, that's awesome. If we are a luxury purchase that in a crisis you ditch, I would rather know that, and I'll devote my 40s to a different business. So I actually kind of reframed COVID as an opportunity to find out if we were really adding value or not. And I figured it's probably only going to take 2 or 3 weeks to get some feedback on whether people see us as an investment with a consistent ROI, or whether people see us as, luxury item, kind of fun to have but not necessary. So that was one thing I did really well, and I just framed it like a bit, not c'est la vie, because we definitely overserviced our client base during COVID, but a good thing. Like, let's find out who we really are and how our clients really think about us. And the very next week, we lost 6 clients, which was 10% of our client base the next week. And then we had 4 alumni clients, we call them, so previous clients, call us up. And one of the conversations I remember so like it was this morning, and he said, hey Sharon, I'm fine to not have a coach in when it's smooth sailing, but the fan is heavily coated, and can I have my coach back now? So we had 6 firms ditch us and 4 kind of re-engage, and then we didn't lose a single client for 15 months. Our business grew by over 60% in the first year of COVID, which was not what we expected. But I think that going in with that mindset, so we didn't have the fear. We didn't try and sugarcoat what was going on or lie to our clients. clients. We were just in the zone to go, well, let's be as helpful as we can. The coaches had a really good point, which was we are an incredible team and an incredible asset in a crisis, because I've got people who ran businesses during the GFC, during the 87 bond crash. Like, I've got people who ran businesses through every crisis of the last 30 years. So we did have a strong team to help our clients through that. Another thing I did, Adrian, which I've done again for this conference, we were supposed to have a conference in August 2020. It was, at the time of March, it was fully booked. All of the sponsors were locked in, all of the tickets were sold, and I had all of the cash sitting in an account unspent. I had seen other businesses really stuff up large event cash flow, where they'd sort of use the money as if it was just normal income, and I'd seen that backfire in the past. So I just had all those tickets and sponsorship monies just sitting in an account. So when it came time to go, we've got to call it and we have to refund all this money, it caused me no stress whatsoever. One button, we refunded over $300,000. And in fact, other large event organisers treated sponsors really poorly during that time, and held on to their funds, or, changed live events to virtual events, and, kept the big sponsorship money. So pretty proud of kind of that cash management around that large event. And the final thing, which maybe you're going to tell me was not my wisest, but it worked for us. During COVID, we were committed to running a face-to-face business. I'm not sure if this is good for public consumption, but we said, let's be nimble. Let's live a little bit in the grey area, and remain a face-to-face business. So even though we're a coaching business, in COVID we realised we're actually an events business. We run over 60 live events a year, and obviously we couldn't get to WA, but our WA clients could get together. So we still booked a room at the QT in Perth, and all of our clients gathered and we zoomed in. We ran lots of events in Byron Bay, because, as everyone knows, COVID couldn't take place in Byron Bay.
No, wasn't allowed.
No, so all of Queensland could get to Byron, and all of New South Wales could get to Byron for a time. We ran lots of events in the Hunter Valley because we couldn't get to Sydney. So the Peppers in the Hunter Valley became our second home. So we sort of operated in the grey area, did a lot of travel, all within the rules.
All within the rules, that's the main thing?
Yep. No, never broke a rule. That did involve one of our coaches getting locked out of Queensland for 8 weeks, which we didn't intend, but that was a risk that we were all willing to take to continue to sort of help our community stay strong. And I guess that comes back to that whole person idea. Like, we thought during this event, people probably need to catch up with our community more, not less.
Yeah, I love all of that. I mean, I think it goes to a number of things in business. I mean, thinking differently for a start, just going against the grain, going against what everybody else is probably thinking should be done. Acting in the best interest of your clients and your supporters. With that's what we should do as a business. We should refund the money. We should let them go and make a decision and leave, and we should support that. And I personally love that, and that's why I guess you and me, Sharon, get along well, and I think have got many of the same sort of mindsets, and share the same philosophy to business. But it's to me it's poorly done so often, and so often you sort of find people wanting to follow the crowd or be like the sheep or whatever, and do the same thing that everybody else is doing. But I love the thinking differently. It's a big part of what we do.
I often find that thinking differently, Adrian, comes at a cost to margin. So, yep, the most profitable decision I could have made during COVID is to move to a Zoom or an online sort of delivery model. And I had many people tell me that, I was crazy for running a coaching business, live, when I could have run the business via online. And you know what? We're not purely around for profit. Like our purpose is comes before our margin, and I know that in order to be in business in 10 years' time, which is our intention, that yep, we need to run a profitable business, but in order to sleep at night, the most important thing to me is to add value to our clients. So yeah, I often find that, you know, they say zig when others zag. Well, often that is not the reason everyone is zagging, is because that's where the short-term money is. But I think maybe long-term, sticking to your values is where the real game is at.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think you're 100% right. The short-term thinking is oftentimes what leads to those sorts of decisions, and if it doesn't line up with, you know, I use the word the end game obviously, but if it doesn't line up with the end game when it comes to your passion of where you want this business to be, the purpose of this business, and if it doesn't line up with the end game in terms of even the financial outlook, then you really should consider not doing it. You know, you really should consider if it's just a short-term cash grab, that's not going to build long-term value for your business, your people, or yourself.
Yep, and comes at a long-term cost to your brand, and yeah, I love the transparency that comes with you know, being authentic in your decision making, such that you can share this is how I came to that decision and this is why.
100% authenticity in that decision making, and authenticity just generally in your day to day. You know, how you deal with people, how you put yourself out there for your personal brand, and the things that you're passionate about. I think is so important. And so many times you see people probably trying to be something that they're not. I don't think that ever really works.
Yeah, and I find when people can't explain how they came to a decision, it's not that they don't know how they came to that decision, it's that they don't want you to know how they came to that decision.
I like that one. I really like that one. Yeah, that's an interesting observation. So we talk a lot about the success stories and your successes. What's your biggest failure as a CEO?
So I think what I would say and what others would say might be different. So I'm going to pitch both of them to you. I've made 3 significant recruitment mistakes, and you know, they were all unique mistakes. I didn't make the same mistake 3 times, but they all boil down to not trusting my gut and wanting something to be true, so that I rationalised it to be true. So yeah, those 3 mistakes, if I quantify them, the opportunity cost is well into the 7 figures. So that's, you know, I one of them particularly that I'm hard on myself. I was asking some, you know, just direct questions about experience and capability, and I was getting a sort of quite professional word salad back. I asked the questions for a second time, and I sort of never. And then I left it alone. And had I pushed until I was confident that I understood the experience and capability of that person, then I would have avoided 18 months of heartache there. So yeah, I would say it's 3 recruitment decisions. Others, and I hang out with people who run really successful, quite large businesses, or like yourself, who've been CEOs multiple times. So I've been told by others that potentially it's a mistake that I continue to make, which is my risk tolerance for clients having a negative experience or not getting an outcome is virtually 0. So if you take that use the analogy of Disneyland, if Disneyland's risk tolerance for someone to have a bad day was 0, then instead of letting 80,000 people into the park, they might let 1,000 people into the park, and each family would probably have their own private concierge just to make sure that no one had a bad day. And I'm letting fewer than 1,000 people into the Disneyland park right now because my risk tolerance is 0. We're really careful about who we select as clients, and then we are really careful about everyone getting a measurable financial result and also having a great experience. So I've had people tell me, listen, you don't need to dial it up too much, but you are incredible at deleveraging your business. Like that's your superpower, is deleveraging, because you want this 100% success rate. So yeah, I'd be interested in your feedback, having been a CEO and helping businesses scale. And I know in technology they just call it churn. And I'm like, oh, that word just grates on me, the fact that we've got this tolerable churn of, 20, 30% of people who just start the product and cancel really quickly. So can you counsel me on that, Adrian?
I mean, I think I'm probably more learning something about myself while you talk. But I certainly find I have a similar thing in the end game business. I don't want to accept at all that a customer is not going to get an outcome from our involvement, and I think I'm the same. I'm really. You've really got me thinking about this whole Disneyland thing. I think I probably am the same, but I think that's what, probably you're the same. I think that's what I want for the customers in this now scenario of where I am. It's interesting your discussion about those hiring things as well. That is down to that confirmation bias, right? Wanting it to be so true, accepting all of the things that are pointing in that direction, and saying they're the things, they're the things that I'm gonna that are my evidence, and I'll ignore all the rest of it. But moving back into the as a CEO role, and sort of actions as a CEO, I think I've always had a real need to have the customer satisfaction, but probably not as much as when in your own business, and when your customers are so immediate and in front of you. That's where I've been, I guess, more towards your Disneyland sort of an analogy. And it's really interesting for me to think about, CEO roles I've gone into where I haven't founded the business, where I'm in there to repair the business, and the actions you're taking there are different to as when you're a founder. But I'm thinking out aloud in that sense at the moment, and you've definitely got me thinking about my own attitude towards that. Could you and me be better at scale if we were to lose that bias? But I guess, would we want to be?
Yeah, and it's, I've sort of been encouraged by a few people to go, you can dial it up from 0%, it is the worst thing to ever happen, to just risking a 1% risk, and actually the result of that is that you help way more people.
Yeah.
Because right now there's there's very much a ceiling on our capacity of how many people we can guarantee 100% result to. I'm actually really comfortable with it, but now that it's conscious, I find myself all the time making decisions to just deleverage and just focus on the outcome for our clients. And I think part of the reason that Slipstream exists is to save people from terrible coaches. So I don't want to risk any single person falling into that category for us. And I also think that the risk of a bad coach, and you would see this in terms of the risk of a bad CEO or the risk of a bad leader is not what you pay them. That's not people think the risk of a bad coach is their fees. It's like, I have seen people get the worst advice that has a lifelong impact. We picked up a client that had this 40% shareholding. It was like a dodgy uncle, and hadn't worked in the business for 12 years. And the business had never grown, so it was never kind of an issue. And they always intended to buy them out. They just hadn't kind of bothered. And they engaged a coach who was a pricing specialist, repriced the entire client base, tripled the value of the business. Oh, guess what? Can't buy the uncle out now. Can't afford it. And that, I still really angry about that. Because it doesn't matter that you paid the coach 40K to do that. Like, that's not the cost. That's a lifelong impact.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just I'm fairly comfortable with my lack of scale, not and not taking it at the expense of future clients.
Yeah, and I mean, you've really got me thinking now, and I think I'm going to be reflecting on this conversation for some time. And I've always had a particular business scale that I've performed best in, and a particular revenue size and team size. And you do have me thinking now of whether or not that's part of the reason as to once they get a little bit bigger, it's not where I want to be anymore. I play in a sweet spot of between a certain size of revenue and that small and going into medium-sized businesses. But once they get to a certain scale, I see it, or I've always thought of it as losing interest, but now you've got me thinking about it in a different way. Yeah,
potentially it's losing control of outcomes.
Yeah, losing control of outcomes, and particularly losing control of that customer experience. Because it's always been such a big part for me, is that is needed.
Yeah, and you would say that Disneyland invests massive amounts of time and energy and money into their customer experience, but they're not willing to limit the growth and scale by having a tolerance of 0.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for joining us today, Sharon.
This has been beautiful.
I very much enjoyed it. I really enjoyed having you on board and going for a fly, and you've got me thinking about some different things. So I always enjoy and love to learn something new while we go on these adventures. So really enjoyable. Thanks again for coming aboard.
Pleasure to hang out and be here, Adrian.
Very good. Thanks, Sharon.